Welcome to Oral Language, a From the Start reading project, supporting language development during the literacy block in 5 minutes or less. Oral language supports and influences every working part of reading and writing. Oral language is natural. It comes first in our language development, and its development is predictable. Upon the age of formal schooling and the advent of early literacy instruction, oral language continues to provide the bedrock connection sustaining any code-based activities like reading and writing. Tools of oral language, vocabulary, context, verbal reasoning, develop through the social use of language, including the sharing of thoughts, ideas, requests, and insights with our caregivers and extended communities. Tools of written language, knowledge of the written code, begin with the insight provided by the alphabetic principle, a realization that speech sounds will be represented by symbols of print. As formal literacy instruction takes hold, children are taught to recognize speech to text connections of an increasingly complex nature. Spoken language is both receptive and expressive. If the elements of oral language are put along a continuum, the component skills can be conceptualized from first listening to language processing for understanding, or simply stated, thinking and generating a response, which results in speaking, the expressive element of oral language. Then, when the written code of our language is introduced, the recognition task of reading also becomes the voice inside our head as we realize that the symbols on the page reflect our verbal communications. We learn to garner information from the text and again formulate responses in our mind that ultimately become the production task of writing. The written code of language is arbitrary or made up, and success with these skills is dependent on the conscious recognition of oral language from speech sounds and structures to vocabulary, syntax, and discourse. There is a symbiotic relationship between the strength of our oral language and the way in which we can interact with and master the written code of our language. One reinforces the other along our journey to being proficient communicators in both spoken and written formats. Oral language skills are critical to the acquisition of fluent reading and writing skills, as reflected here in a typical progression from oral language skills, denoted as speaking and listening, to increasing independence as demonstrated by the transition to expectations for reading and writing. Teachers can look for growth in the following domains of language: phonology, vocabulary, morphology, grammar, pragmatics, and discourse. At times, it will be necessary to teach to and strengthen each of these components individually, and just as often, it will be necessary to engage their interconnected nature. Language is a streamlined process for communicating thought. As is indicated here, stronger language skills means stronger cognitive skills. Coming up next, you will be introduced to a simple technique for building a classroom which is supportive of oral language. Dr. Dana Suskind describes the 3 T's of verbal communication as tune in, take turns, talk more. Enjoy a selection from a podcast where she describes how the 3 T's relate to the classroom experience.